$120,000. That's not a number I read in a headline. That's not a statistic from some FTC report. That's my inheritance, my divorce settlement, and 4 years of freelance invoices sitting in a digital wallet that on a Tuesday morning in March simply stopped existing. I remember the exact second I understood what had happened. I was standing in my kitchen in Denver, coffee going cold in my hand, refreshing an app that would not load. Not loading, not server error. Gone. The account, the support chat, the man I'd spoken to almost every day for 4 months. Gone, like none of it had ever been real. And here's the thing nobody tells you about being scammed. The money disappearing isn't the worst part. The worst part is the half second before you accept it, when your brain is still trying to build you an exit ramp. Maybe it's a glitch. Maybe he's just busy. Maybe I did something wrong. That half second is where they live. That's the whole business model, keeping you in that half second for as long as possible, because every extra day you spend hoping is another day they have to move the money somewhere you'll never find it. They thought they got away with it. They were wrong. This is the story of how I lost $120,000 to a crypto investment scam, the kind of operation federal investigators now call pig butchering, because that's exactly what it is. You're fattened up before you're slaughtered. And this is the story of how I spent the next 14 months turning myself into an amateur financial investigator, built a case file thick enough to make a federal agent whistle, and got back more of that money than anyone, including my own attorney, thought was possible. If you've ever wired money to someone you met online, if you've ever stared at a trading app showing gains that felt too good, or if you're the person who thinks that could never happen to me, stay until the end, because that's exactly what I used to think too. Before we go further, let me be clear about what this video is and isn't. This isn't a video that ends with me quietly writing off a loss and moving on with my life. Today's story is about greed, betrayal, and getting every single dollar that the law would allow me to get back, and about the people who never thought a single mom with a marketing degree would be the reason their operation got flagged by the Department of Justice. I'm going to walk you through this exactly as it happened. The setup, the red flags I ignored, the moment the money left my account, the investigation that followed, and the ending, which involves a federal wire fraud case, a civil judgment, and a twist about where my $120,000 actually went that I did not see coming. If you're new here, this channel covers real financial fraud cases and the fight to reclaim what was stolen. Subscribe if you want to see more stories like this one, and stick around because the warning signs I'm about to describe are things scam operations are using on thousands of Americans right now, today, while you're watching this. Let's start at the beginning. Let's start with who I was before all of this happened. My name, for the purposes of this story, is Melissa. I was 43 years old, recently divorced, running a small freelance graphic design business out of a converted spare bedroom. 18 months earlier, my mother had passed away, and along with the grief came something I wasn't prepared for: money. Not a fortune, $95,000 from her life insurance and the sale of her house, on top of about $30,000 I'd managed to keep from the divorce settlement. For the first time in my adult life, I had a cushion, a real one, and I had no idea what to do with it. I want to pause here because this is the part victims rarely say out loud, and it's the part that matters most. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't naive about money. I had a 401k. I knew what a Roth IRA was. What I didn't have was experience with sudden, unfamiliar money, grief money, and I didn't have anyone to talk it through with. My ex-husband was gone. My mother, the person I would have called, was the reason I had the money in the first place. That combination, a life transition, isolation, and a lump sum sitting in a savings account earning 0.4% interest, is not a coincidence. It's a demographic. Scam operations refer to potential targets using an actual industry term, leads, and divorced or widowed people in their 40s and 50s sitting on a settlement or an inheritance are considered premium leads. I didn't know that yet. I just knew I was lonely, financially anxious, and spending a lot of time on my phone. It started on LinkedIn, of all places, not a dating app. LinkedIn. A connection request from a man named Daniel Chen, profile photo of a clean-cut guy in his late 30s, bio reading senior financial analyst at a firm I'd vaguely heard of, passionate about helping people build generational wealth. We had, according to LinkedIn, 6 mutual connections. I now know that a mutual connection on a fake profile is trivially easy to manufacture. You simply connect with enough real people in someone's industry before you ever approach the target, so the platform's own algorithm vouches for you. I accepted. He commented thoughtfully on a design post I'd made. A week later, a friendly direct message. Hope this isn't too forward, I just really appreciated your perspective on that post. Are you the same Melissa who does branding for small businesses? I might have a referral for you. That's the hook. Notice what it isn't. It isn't a pitch, it isn't romantic, it's professional, low pressure, and it offers me something, a referral, before asking me for anything at all. This is what fraud investigators call the long con architecture. Value first, ask later, and never both in the same conversation. Over the next 3 weeks, Daniel and I talked almost every day, never about money, about my business, about a rescue dog I'd just adopted, about a trip he said he'd taken to Lisbon. He was, by every appearance, thoughtful, curious, and consistent, always online around the same hours, always responsive within a couple of hours, never asking me for anything. In hindsight, that consistency was itself a red flag. Real people with real, demanding jobs are not available on a predictable schedule 7 days a week, but at the time it read as reliability. Let me list the red flags now, because you'll recognize some of these from your own life, and that recognition is the entire point of telling this story. Red flag 1. He never once suggested a phone call in the first month. Every "let's talk soon" turned into, "actually, can we just keep texting, I'm swamped." Voice would have revealed an accent, a hesitation, a scripted cadence. Text is controllable. Text can be run by 3 different people in 3 different time zones, and you'd never know the difference. Red flag 2. He mentioned his portfolio casually, almost reluctantly, only after I brought up my own financial uncertainty. I don't usually talk about this stuff with people outside of work, but I've been doing really well with a specific crypto strategy the last 2 years. I asked him to explain. He demurred twice before giving in. That reluctance is theater. Nobody who has genuinely made a great return is that hard to get details out of. What's actually happening is the target being made to feel like she talked her way into privileged information, which makes her defend it later as her own idea. Red flag 3. The platform he eventually pointed me to wasn't Coinbase or Kraken or Fidelity's crypto product. It was an app called Nova Trend Capital, a name I could not find on FINRA's broker check, could not find registered with the SEC, and could not find a single mainstream news article about. What I could find was a slick website, a support chat that answered within 90 seconds, and a string of 5-star reviews on a review site I now know can be purchased in bulk. Red flag 4, and the one that should have ended everything. When I asked if the app was regulated, Daniel sent me a screenshot of what looked like a regulatory certificate from an offshore authority I'd never heard of. I didn't verify it. I didn't call anyone. I looked at a screenshot and felt reassured, because by that point, I wanted to be reassured. The first deposit was small on purpose, $500 in early February, converted to USDT, a crypto stablecoin, through an exchange he walked me through step by step, patiently, screen share and all. Within 4 days, my $500 had grown to $612. I could see a withdraw button. I clicked it mostly out of curiosity, half expecting nothing to happen. $612 landed in my linked bank account 2 days later. I want you to sit with that for a second, because that single successful withdrawal is the entire mechanism of this scam. It costs the operation $612, and it buys them almost total trust. From that point forward, I wasn't investing on faith. I had proof. I'd tested the system myself. Every subsequent deposit I made not because Daniel told me to, but because my own bank statement told me it worked. Over the following 10 weeks, I sent 5 more transfers. $4,000, $9,500, $22,000, $38,000, and finally, in early May, after Daniel told me about a limited-time liquidity mining tier that would close permanently in 48 hours and that he'd personally vouched for me to get into, $45,800, nearly the entirety of what remained of my mother's money. Total sent, $119,800. The dashboard, by then, showed a balance of $187,340. I had never felt smarter about money in my life. The first thing that went wrong wasn't dramatic. It was a withdrawal request for $8,000 in early June, money I wanted to move for a client tax payment that got stuck in pending for 6 days instead of the usual 48 hours. When I asked support, I got a message that read almost exactly like the last one, just with different numbers. A network congestion fee of $1,200 needed to be paid in crypto to unlock the withdrawal. I paid it, $1,200 on top of everything else, because by that point, I had already convinced myself I was $187,000 deep into something real, and $1,200 felt like a rounding error to protect it. The withdrawal still didn't process. Over the next 2 weeks, the fees kept coming, each with a different official-sounding justification: a tax compliance clearance of $3,400, an anti-money laundering verification deposit of $6,000, which the support chat promised, in writing, would be refunded the moment my balance was released. I paid that one too, because at this point I was not making a rational decision about a new investment. I was trying to rescue money I already believed was mine. Behavioral economists have a name for this: the sunk cost trap, weaponized. Scam operations don't just take your money once. They take it in a way specifically engineered to make you feel like not paying the next fee is the reckless choice, and paying it is the responsible one. Then, on June 24th, Daniel stopped responding. Not slower, not distracted, silent. His LinkedIn profile, the one with 6 mutual connections and a senior financial analyst title, was deleted entirely. The NovaTrend Capital app's support chat began auto-replying with a canned message about scheduled maintenance. Within 4 days, the app itself was gone from the App Store. The website returned a blank page. The domain, when I looked it up, had been registered through a privacy-shielded registrar in a jurisdiction with essentially no cooperation with U.S. law enforcement.
That kitchen moment I described at the start of this video, the cold coffee, the refreshing app, that was June 28th. Total losses at that point, principal plus fees, $131,000. I later got back roughly $11,000 through a dispute on one of the smaller transfers, which is why I referred to the core loss as $120,000 throughout this story. I need to be honest about what this actually cost, because the dollar figure alone doesn't capture it. Financially, I lost the bulk of my mother's inheritance, the money from my divorce settlement that was supposed to be a down payment on a house, and I put $6,000 of the later fees on a credit card, which meant I was now also paying 24% interest on top of the theft itself. Relationally, I hadn't told anyone what I was doing because a part of me, a part I'm not proud of, knew that a friend or a sibling would have asked the questions I wasn't asking myself. When I finally told my sister, 3 weeks after the money vanished, her first reaction wasn't sympathy, it was disbelief that I hadn't said anything sooner. That conversation was one of the hardest of my life, and it took months to repair the trust between us. Emotionally, I want to describe this precisely because shame is the second weapon these operations use, right alongside the fake trading dashboard. For about 6 weeks, I told almost no one. I went to work, I answered client emails, I smiled at a coffee shop, and every single night I lay awake doing math that never came out differently. Financial fraud victims report psychological effects comparable to victims of violent crime, a genuine, documented finding from federal victim assistance research, and I understood exactly why. It wasn't just money, it was the violation of having built a relationship, real feelings and all, with something that was never a person to begin with. It was speaking for 4 months to what I now believe was likely a rotating team of operators working from a script, possibly overseas, possibly coerced into that work themselves, a detail I'll come back to. My first call was to my bank. I explained the wire transfers, the crypto conversions, all of it. The fraud department was sympathetic and almost entirely powerless, because I had authorized every transfer myself. Willingly, this didn't meet the legal definition of unauthorized fraud under Regulation E, which governs electronic transfers I didn't approve. Authorized transfers, even ones obtained through deception, sit in a much harder legal category. I got back approximately $3,000 from one transfer that was flagged as suspicious by the bank's own systems before it fully cleared. That was it. My second call was to my crypto exchange I'd used to convert dollars to USDT. Once crypto leaves an exchange for an external wallet, the exchange has no ability to reverse it. That's the entire design of blockchain transactions. They confirmed the destination wallet had already moved my funds onward multiple times through what's called a mixing or chain hopping process designed specifically to make the money trail difficult to follow. My third call was to my local police department. The officer who took the report was kind, but honest with me. A case involving an offshore crypto wallet and an anonymous LinkedIn profile was, in his words, outside what we have the tools to chase. He gave me a case number, told me to file with the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, and wished me luck.
14 months of my life. If nobody with a badge was going to build this case for me, I was going to build it myself. Before I describe becoming my own investigator, it's worth understanding what I was up against, because the sophistication surprised me. The operation had used a burner LinkedIn profile built over months to look organic. The Nova Trend Capital app had a real-looking dashboard, a real-looking customer support chat with response times tuned to feel human, and a domain registered anonymously offshore. My money had been converted to crypto specifically because crypto transfers, once sent, are irreversible and pseudonymous, traceable in theory, but only to someone who knows how to read a blockchain ledger. And the fee structure, the unlock and compliance charges, was designed to extract the maximum possible amount from a victim in the exact window between suspicion and certainty, because that window is short and it only opens once. They had done this before. I was about to find out how many times. The first thing I did that same week was create what I can only describe as a case file, a single shared folder with subfolders for every category of evidence, screenshots of every message exchanged with Daniel dating back to the first LinkedIn connection request, bank statements showing every wire and crypto purchase with dates, amounts, and confirmation numbers, every version of the Nova Trend Capital app I could still find cached, through the Wayback Machine, through my own old screenshots, through a browser extension that had, coincidentally, archived a page I'd visited in March. And then I did something that felt almost absurd at the time. I learned to read a blockchain explorer. For anyone unfamiliar, a blockchain explorer is a public, searchable ledger of every transaction on a network like Ethereum or Bitcoin. Every wallet address is a string of letters and numbers, and every transaction between wallets is permanently visible to anyone who looks. You just need the wallet address to start pulling the thread. I had 6 confirmation numbers from my own crypto purchases. Each one led to a wallet address. Each wallet address led to a transaction history. And that's when I found the smoking gun. The wallet that received my $45,800 liquidity mining deposit, the largest single transfer I made, had also received deposits from 11 other wallets in the same 3-week window, all in similar round number amounts: $38,000, $52,000, $19,500. 11 other people, all funneling money into the same destination in the same narrow window I was funneling mine. I didn't know their names, I didn't know their faces, but I knew with total certainty that I was not the only premium lead this operation had worked that spring.
I started searching for the exact phrases Daniel Chen had used with me: liquidity mining tier, network congestion fee, anti-money laundering verification deposit, across Reddit, across a Facebook group called Crypto Scam Survivors that I found almost by accident, across the FTC's public complaint database. The phrasing matched almost word for word across 9 other reported cases over the previous 18 months. Same script, same fee escalation pattern, different names for the advisor, different app names, same wallet infrastructure underneath. At this point, I hired an attorney, not a criminal prosecutor since I couldn't compel that, but a civil litigator who specialized in cryptocurrency asset recovery, a niche legal specialty that essentially didn't exist a decade ago and now has entire firms built around it. Her retainer was $7,500, money I genuinely did not have to spare, and it was, without exaggeration, the single best financial decision I made in this entire ordeal. She did 3 things I could never have done alone. First, she engaged a blockchain forensics firm, the same kind of specialized analytics companies that work with federal agencies, to formally trace the wallet clusters and produce a report suitable for use in a legal filing, not just a Reddit thread. Second, she filed a complaint with FinCEN, the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Unit, alongside the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center report I'd already submitted and the FTC's fraud database. Filing with all 3 matters because each agency has different jurisdiction, and a case that looks too small for one can be part of a pattern significant enough for another to act on. Third, and this is the part that actually moved the needle, she identified that a portion of the traced funds had passed through a US-based cryptocurrency exchange before being moved further offshore. That single fact mattered enormously because a US-based exchange is subject to US subpoena power in a way an offshore wallet never will be. Where the money merely sits doesn't matter as much as where it was cashed out or converted, and a subpoena to that exchange could, in theory, reveal a real name attached to a real bank account. For nearly 2 months, that subpoena request sat in a legal queue, and during that window, we watched, through blockchain monitoring alerts my attorney's forensics contact had set up, as the largest remaining cluster of funds began moving again, in smaller increments, toward what looked like an attempt to cash out through a different, less cooperative offshore exchange before the paperwork could catch up. That was the closest this entire case came to falling apart completely. If that final conversion had completed before the subpoena cleared, the trail would very likely have gone permanently cold, dispersed into an exchange with no obligation to respond to a U.S. court. My attorney filed an emergency motion requesting expedited review, citing the FinCEN complaint and the pattern evidence from the other 9 victims I'd identified through my own research, now formally incorporated into the case file. The judge granted it. The subpoena went out 9 days before the final transfer would have completed. While the legal machinery ground forward, I made one more decision. I went public. Carefully, not with names. I didn't have a confirmed real name yet, and I wasn't going to risk a defamation problem by guessing wrong, but with the pattern. I posted a detailed screenshot-supported account in the Crypto Scam Survivors group and on a consumer fraud subreddit, describing the script phrase for phrase, the fake app, the fee escalation. Within a week, 4 more people reached out to me directly. 3 of them had lost money to what was unmistakably the same operation, different fake names, different fake apps, one nearly identical liquidity mining tier pitch.
The fourth had almost fallen for it and pulled out at the fee stage, recognizing the pattern from a post very similar to mine. That message, oddly, meant almost as much to me as anything that happened in the legal case. Somebody's $22,000 stayed in their own account because of a Reddit post. Combined, my attorney and I now had a documented pattern across at least 13 victims and roughly $890,000 in traceable losses tied to the same wallet infrastructure. That is the number that turns a small individual case outside our tools into a federal wire fraud and money laundering investigation. 14 months after that first LinkedIn connection request, I got a phone call from a special agent with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. The subpoenaed exchange records connected the wallet cluster to an account holder, a real name, a real social security number used at account setup, and ultimately, a real person, a man operating not alone but as part of a small network running several parallel scam operations using rotating personas. Daniel Chen was one of at least 6 names authorities were able to link to the same script and infrastructure, targeting victims across at least 4 states. He was indicted on federal charges, including wire fraud and money laundering. I want to be careful here because I'm telling you my case's outcome, not narrating a trial I didn't personally attend in full, but the publicly available result was a guilty plea to reduce exposure at trial, a restitution order, and a multi-year federal prison sentence. Restitution orders are notoriously difficult to actually collect. A defendant can be sentenced to pay back every dollar and still have none of it materialize because the money's simply not there anymore. This is the part of these stories that rarely gets the triumphant ending people want, so I want to be precise about what I actually recovered because it wasn't everything and it wasn't instant. Through the asset forfeiture process, where law enforcement seizes property and funds directly tied to the crime before they can be dissipated further, a portion of the wallet cluster's remaining crypto holdings were frozen and eventually liquidated. Combined with a civil settlement my attorney negotiated, structured as a judgment against seized assets rather than a promise to pay over time, which matters enormously for actually collecting, I recovered $71,400 of the $120,000 I'd lost, roughly 60%. Add the earlier $11,000 recovered through the bank dispute, and my total recovery came to just over $82,000.
I will not pretend that number felt like a full victory. It wasn't. I am still, as of this recording, paying down the credit card debt from those unlock fees. But I want to say this plainly because it's true. 60% recovery on a crypto fraud case is considered an exceptional outcome. Federal victim assistance data on cryptocurrency fraud recovery rates, broadly, puts typical recovery in the low single digits, often close to 0. I got 60% because I built a paper trail before anyone official was looking, because I found other victims before an agency connected the dots, and because I paid for a specialist attorney in week 1 instead of month 8. Here's the part of this story that I didn't see coming, and it's the part that changed how I think about all of it. During discovery in the civil case, my attorney obtained financial records showing where a portion of my money and the roughly $890,000 in aggregate traced losses actually went. It wasn't yachts, it wasn't a mansion. A meaningful share had been funneled upward through the network to fund the operational costs of other, larger scam call centers, the kind of large-scale fraud compounds, often overseas, that federal and international reporting has increasingly documented as sometimes staffed by trafficking victims, coerced into running these exact scripts under threat. I'm not asking you to feel sympathy for the man who took my money. He made choices, ran a script deliberately, and is now serving a federal sentence for it. But learning that my $120,000 helped fund a machine that may have coerced other, different victims into doing the scamming, that reframed the entire 14 months for me.
this isn't just a story about one bad actor. It's a story about an industry, and industries don't stop because one node gets arrested. They route around it. That's part of why I decided to make this story public at all. I did rebuild, slower than I wanted, more carefully than before. What's left of the recovered money went into boring, regulated, FINRA-registered accounts I can verify with a 2-minute phone call to my broker. I check broker check now before I trust anyone with $1. I have a rule, non-negotiable. No financial decision above $500 gets made without a phone call, an actual voice to someone I already know in real life. And I talk about this now, publicly, loudly, specifically because shame is the thing that let this go on as long as it did, and I refuse to hand that weapon back to anyone. If you take one thing from this story, take this. The warning signs were there the entire time, and I want to walk through them quickly, because recognizing them in real time is the only defense that actually works. 1. Be suspicious of any relationship, romantic, professional, or purely social, that reaches a point of financial advice before you've ever spoken by voice or met in person. 2. A real investment platform is verifiable. Check the SEC's Edgar database and FINRA's broker check. If a platform, advisor, or firm doesn't appear in either, that is not a minor oversight. It is disqualifying. 3. Any request for an additional fee to release funds you already believe are yours, a tax fee, a compliance fee, a congestion fee, is not a real financial mechanism. Legitimate institutions do not ask you to pay money to receive money. 4. Urgency is a manufactured tool, not a real market condition. This closes in 48 hours is a pressure tactic virtually every time. 5. If you ever find yourself in this situation, document everything immediately. Screenshots, wallet addresses, transaction IDs, dates. File with the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3.gov, and the FTC, reportfraud.ftc.gov, the same day you realize something is wrong, not after you've tried to resolve it quietly on your own. Time is the one resource you cannot get back, and in these cases, it's the resource that matters most. I'm not a financial advisor, and I'm not an attorney. I'm someone who lived through this and paid professionals to help me fight it, and I'd encourage anyone in a similar position to do the same rather than navigate it entirely alone. Have you been targeted by something like this? A crypto scam, a romance scam, an investment opportunity that turned out to be neither? Tell me what happened in the comments. I read every one, and more often than I expected, those comments have turned into exactly the kind of pattern matching that helped me build my own case. Thank you for watching, and if this story helped you spot something before it happened to you, that's the whole reason I told it.